Thank you, David and Crystal, for having me. The pleasure is on my side. So, I'm Carsten Rachfahl, a German-based cloud and data center management MVP and Azure MVP, and I'm also Veeam Vanguard. And in this presentation, I talk about the two Azure Stack HCIs and what you should know about them. Let's dive into our presentation. So, where's my mouse? Come on, mouse. So what are the two Azure Stack HCI? So there is a bit of a not problem, but there is a bit of misunderstanding. What is Azure Stack HCI? And it first, Microsoft had a certification program for storage spaces direct in Windows Server 2016 that was called Windows Server Software Defined. And Microsoft decided to rename this certification program for storage spaces direct in Windows Server 2019 to Azure Stack HCI. And that was early 2019, if I remember correctly. So this is the first Azure Stack HCI, and I will call it from now on Storage Spaces Direct. And then in the summer of 2020, so this year, Microsoft announced a new operating system called Azure Stack HCI, and it has an addition for the number. It's 20H2. That will be the first available version, and we hope we get it very soon, still in December. So this is a purpose-built operating system for hyper-converged infrastructure with Hyper-V, with the basis of storage spaces direct with software-defined networking. But it's not the full Windows Server. The roots are in Windows Server, but it's of course changed. It will change over time, and I will call it from now Azure Stack HCI. So to be clear, the storage spaces direct in Windows Server 2019, I call storage spaces direct, and the new operating system I call Azure Stack HCI. So the OS. First, let's look at the OS level. Storage Spaces Direct, as I already mentioned, is Windows Server. You know it. You know Windows, of course. You are working with Windows, I assume, for many years now, and you completely feel at home. We have a GUI option if we want to, so we can install the full GUI experience, and we can also install it in a core version. And of course, if you are a virtualization guy or gal, Hyper-V is a natural fit for Windows Server, and for that, Storage Spaces Direct is also naturally fitting into the Windows Server experience. On the other hand, we have Azure Stack HCI, and it's a specialized host operating system only for a very limited amount of use cases, and the main use case is, of course, virtualization, storage, so an hyper-converged infrastructure system with software-defined network and so on. So we will not have a domain controller here, not DHCP, not DNS, not a PKA, and not a file server. And you know, there are many things in Windows Server that we love and use every day, but Azure Stack HCI is not the operating system for that. That is Windows Server. So Microsoft designed a new operating system, and to be precise, it is only a core version. So you should not work really on the console of Azure Stack HCI. You should remotely manage it. And that's one point I love about Storage Spaces Direct in Windows Server. You can work in a full console, and you have all the tools you need for debugging and so on. And I know some people misunderstand that concept, and they also install applications in the Windows Server console and run a domain controller in the same in the same partition than the Hyper-V, and that's of course not what you should do. It's just I like the GUI just for debugging and working with PowerShell and so on. So then management. How is Storage Spaces Direct and Azure Stack HCI managed? So in essence, the same. So you can use the same tooling for both. You have Hyper-V Manager, of course, for storage spaces direct, but you can also use Hyper-V Manager if you want to. It's not the preferred management tool from Microsoft's viewpoint, but you can use Hyper-V Manager to manage your virtual machines in an Azure Stack HCI environment. Then we have, of course, Failover Cluster Manager. Azure Stack HCI also uses a failover cluster for the high availability, just as Storage Spaces Direct does. Then we, of course, have PowerShell, and PowerShell is a very important part of both systems. And we have Windows Admin Center to manage both environments. So you can use Windows Admin Center to manage Storage Spaces Direct, but also, of course, to manage Azure Stack HCI. And it is the preferred management platform for both systems. And though I have also to add, you can also use Virtual Machine Manager from the System Center suite and also the System Center Operation Manager to manage and monitor both Storage Spaces Direct and also Azure Stack HCI. Microsoft announced that the next cumulative update of Virtual Machine Manager 2019 also can manage Azure Stack HCI. But to be precise, Windows Admin Center is the preferred management on premises. So how you create a new Storage Spaces Direct or Azure Stack HCI cluster. Now in Windows Admin Center, we have in the new cluster part of Windows Admin Center, we have Create Cluster, and there is a very nice wizard that will take you through the different steps if you create an Azure Stack HCI system or also a Storage Spaces Direct system. So Windows Admin Center is the best management, in my opinion, for both scenarios. And then we have for Azure Stack HCI, it's part of Azure. So don't get me wrong, you install your servers on premises, but they have to be connected to the cloud because they have to at least tell Azure how many cores you are using in your Azure Stack HCI installation because they are built over Azure. And to the pricing and licensing model, we will come later. But you have to connect Azure Stack HCI to Azure. And with Storage Spaces Direct, you can do that, but you don't have to. And because it's already connected, you can use Azure services to also manage your Azure Stack HCI infrastructure, for example, Azure Monitoring, or we have Azure Resource Manager that can benefit Azure Stack HCI. And Microsoft is integrating Azure Stack HCI into the Azure experience, and I'm very excited about that. So there is a lot of stuff coming, and you can also leverage the Azure Identity Access Management, but we will look about that later. So let's do a small demo before we go to the licensing. Here I'm in Windows Admin Center. I'm connected to my Lenovo hardware, and it is an Azure Stack HCI installation. It's not easy to tell, really, because if you look at a Storage Spaces Direct installation, this is my Data On cluster. These are 4 nodes with Windows Server 2019 installed, and it looks nearly the same. You see, you have some small differences. For example, if you go here to a volume, and let's go into a volume, you see we can turn on deduplication and compression. And if we look at an Azure Stack HCI volume, let's go here, inventory. Here you see we have an additional possibility. We can enable BitLocker on this volume, and I like that a lot because security is very important. So on an Azure Stack HCI installation, you can enable BitLocker by just switching this button. I will not do that. And in a storage basis direct design, we don't have that. But on the other hand, they are quite similar. That can change over time because Azure Stack HCI is heavily developed, so we will get new features all the time, and that then of course the possibilities with Windows Admin Center will change over time. What is possible with Storage Basis Direct and what is possible with Azure Stack HCI. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. So let's talk about licensing. How is the product licensed? So first, Storage Spaces Direct pricing. Storage Spaces Direct is included in the Windows Server Data Center license. So every Storage Spaces Direct node has to have a data center license, and they are different possibilities how you get data center. You can buy, of course, a volume license, a data center volume license. It's around $6,200 for 16 cores. And data center is paid by cores, and you have to have at least 16 cores. There is one special version where you buy a small server with a CPU on the motherboard that you can't exchange with 8 cores. There's a special price over OEMs to get this version. It's roughly half the price. But you buy data center, it's yours. You can use it forever, so no additional costs. Except if you want to have always the newest software and the newest Windows Server. So today you buy Data Center, Windows Server Data Center 2019, and we assume that maybe next year we will have a new Windows Server and you want to have this software too. So you buy software assurance in addition to your data center. And if you want to have the new version. And software assurance is roughly half the price of the volume license data center version. So if the volume license is $6,200 for 16 cores, software assurance will be roughly about $3,100 for 2 years software assurance. The good thing with Windows Data Center, all your Windows Server VMs, the licenses for that you run in your Storage Basis Direct Design are included in the data center license. So for Windows Server VMs, you don't need any additional license, so you don't have any additional cost. If you run Linux, that doesn't matter. Data center, you don't have to have data center for Linux VMs, or if you do VDI with Windows clients, you need another license. So the Windows Server Data Center does not include the licensing for the Windows client. So but to say that if you choose to mainly virtualize Windows Server VMs, Storage Basis Direct is the best price you can get on the market for every HCI solution, because every other HCI solution bill you for the solution. For example, if you use Nutanix, you have to buy Nutanix and the data center license for the Windows Server VMs. If you buy vSAN, for example, you have to buy vSAN with the ESX licensing and the vSAN licensing and data center. So Storage Basis Direct is a great offering for Windows Server virtualization. On the other hand, Azure Stack HCI is an Azure subscription. So you pay what you use per month. So in example, if we compare it with a host that had 16 cores, the price is announced with $10. I hope it will be the price when the product launches, but so far they talked about $10 per core per month. So if you have a 16 core machine, you will pay $160 per month over your Azure subscription. And that's a price of $1,920 a year. In that price, there is, because it's a subscription, you always have the newest version. You will get the new version, for example, 21H2 next year. You will get the new features in the product and can use them. On the other hand, there is no Windows Server licensing included. So you have to add, if you want to virtualize Windows Server, two possibilities. You have already your Windows Server licenses and you add them to the Azure Stack HCI implementation, or you have to buy them. And if you don't want to virtualize Windows Server, or if you want to virtualize Linux VMs or Windows VDI, so Windows client VMs, you don't have the data center cost, because Storage Spaces Direct has always data center. You have to buy data center for that, but you don't need data center for Linux VMs. You don't need data center for client VMs. So here we have also a nice pricing if you don't use Windows Server VMs in your virtualization environment. So here I have roughly done a little bit of an Excel calculation. So we see here the price over the months. So here we have Storage Spaces Direct for one server with 16 cores. It's 6,200 roughly $6,200 for 16 cores. And I have added, because I want always to have the newest version of the Windows Server base operating system. So I added 3,100 for software assurance. So if you do that, you pay upfront 9,300 euros for the server. And after 24 months, you have to renew your software assurance to always get the new software. You don't have to pay data center again, but you only pay the software assurance. And if you do that, after 24 months, you have to add another $3,100, and after 48 months, you have to do the same. So after 5 years, you have a price of 15,500. And if you don't want to have always the newest software, you only have to pay 6,200, and then you are of course stuck with Windows Server 2019. But that's also okay, and many customers do that. So we have a price of 15,500 after 5 years with software assurance and 6,200 without. For Azure Stack HCI, you pay on a monthly basis for your 16 cores. So after 12 months, you have paid 1,920, then an additional 1,920 after 24 months, and so on. And after 5 years, you have $9,600 paid for always the newest software, but there are no Windows VMs included. So here you have the Windows VMs included in the licensing, and if you don't choose to do software assurance, it's only 6,200 with Windows VMs included. Azure Stack HCI is more expensive, and you have to add the VMs if you do Windows Server virtualization. If you do other virtualization like Linux or VDI, you don't have to add that license. It's another license that you also have to add to Storage Spaces Direct. So in essence, Storage Spaces Direct for Windows Server is a much more affordable option than Azure Stack HCI. So here I have some examples for Storage Spaces Direct pricing, including the hardware. So I know these are very nice Lenovo. Now they are called MX1021. That very nice machines. Cosmos Darwin had them on stage and showed them. They have an 8-core Intel Xeon-D processor, 64 gigabytes of RAM, 2 10 gigabits RDMA cards, 4 NVMEs with 1 terabyte, and so on. And with Windows Server Data Center included, 2 of those machines are roughly around 18,000 euros. In addition, you have to pay VAT. And I have another example also from Lenovo, because I recently did some videos for Lenovo, so I have the pricing here. This is a full 16-core machine with 192 gigabytes of RAM. We have Intel SSDs. We have Mellanox cards to directly connect the servers, and this is roughly around 30,000 euros, including the Windows Server licensing. So, and Azure Stack HCI, as I already mentioned, is subscription, built by a subscription. So you pay every month the cores that are in your Azure Stack HCI hardware. So here we see different pricing models for Azure Stack HCI. And as I already mentioned, Storage Bases Direct, you need at least 16 cores per server. So 16 core is a base. Also, even if you have a smaller design, let's say, for example, this 4-core primary server here, you have to pay 16 cores. Also, if there are only 4 in there. That's a huge advantage with Azure Stack HCI. You only pay for the cores that you use. So with a smaller design, you also pay less money. So maybe an advantage for Azure Stack HCI. Of course, with large servers, this advantage fades away. So what about support? That's also a huge difference with Azure Stack HCI and Storage Bases Direct. First, Storage Bases Direct. In every Microsoft product, support is not really included. So you have to buy it, and there are 2 different options with Storage Bases Direct, and there are additional options over the OEMs where you buy your product. They have separate offerings. Talk to them. But if you want Microsoft support, you have 2 types of support. One is incident-based support. So you have a problem, you call Microsoft, and you pay an amount of money for the support, and it's solution driven. So the support engineer will talk to you, and you agree on a point when the support case will be closed. But they don't do root cause analysis. So if you, for example, CSV is not accessible, they will help you to get the CSV online again. But if that happened for the 4th or 5th time in your environment, that they can't help you with that, because for that you have to do a root cause analysis. If you want that, you have to have premium support, and they do much deeper analysis, but you have to pay upfront for premium support, and it's rather expensive. So you get easily, for your Microsoft environment, you get easily 6 figures per year for the premium support. It's not only for the Storage Bases Direct installation, it's for everything. So that can be very expensive. What is with Azure Stack HCI? Azure Stack HCI is Azure, and it's covered under the Azure support plans. And Azure support plans start from 29 euros a month, and we will look into the different options. So the different options are here. So these are the support plans. We have a developer plan that is $29 per month, but I think it doesn't really include production support. Yeah, trial and non-production environments. If you want to have production support, you have the option of paying $100 a month. That's a standard production support, and here you see we have everything 24/7 included and so on. And if you need more support, there's also an option, the professional direct support. It's $1,000 per month, but it includes your whole Azure Stack subscription. So if you have multiple Azure Stack HCI clusters, they are, as far as I understand, covered under the same support plan. So depending on what you need, you get it for $100 or $1,000 for multiple servers. And I think that's really a great offering. So let's go back to the presentation. And then there are more advantages to Azure Stack HCI. So for example, we have now the support for a stretched cluster, and Storage Bases Direct doesn't support stretched cluster, only Azure Stack HCI does. So if you have 2 separate rooms or 2 separate locations, you can build a part of your cluster in one location and the other part in the other location. Microsoft will leverage Storage Replica to get the data from one location to the other location. So for example, we have some VMs running here on the disks or on the devices that are here, and we have a synchronous or asynchronous mirror to the other side. Here we have the same volume, it's offline, but if we ever have a failure on this side, the volume will be brought online and the VMs can be started. And this is not an active standby scenario. You can also have VMs here with a separate volume or virtual disk, and this is mirrored to the other side. So we have an active design. That is very nice, and especially in Germany and the German-speaking countries, mirror or stretch clusters are really a thing. So I'm very happy about that. I'm very happy about that. Other very interesting features are, for example, fast repairs. So the Microsoft Azure Stack HCI team has re-engineered the storage spaces direct resync engine. So we have here an example in Windows Server 2019 Storage Spaces Direct. If an extent can't be written to a cluster node because the node is, for example, in a reboot scenario. You patch the node, you reboot it, and at this point in time, the extents on the node can't be updated because they are not accessible. The system is in a reboot phase. So Storage Spaces Direct has to remember this extent has to be resynced. And in Windows Server 2019 Storage Spaces Direct, if you write one block to this extent, the whole extent has to be copied over from another system. And that can be quite a number of data. So Microsoft is now in Azure Stack HCI doing sub-extent dirty region tracking. So only a smaller part of the 256 megabytes have to be resynced. Let's say maybe, I don't know the number, but for example, this can be maybe 4 megabytes. That is much faster to sync 4 megabytes if the extent is up again, instead of copying over the whole extent. So, and here we have some numbers, Microsoft numbers. They tested this, and as you see here, it's a very early test. It's all over a year old. You have half the time in a normal scenario, and even in an edge scenario, you have maybe a third of the time. So that's very promising, and I have already seen it. Another good advantage is the integration of firmware and driver updates from the vendor. So with the update in Windows Admin Center, the cluster-aware updating, you can also update your drivers and your firmware and everything you need on your node. So it's more like a solution. You don't have to care about firmware and drivers separately and then the Windows updates. That's very cool. And also the operating system that is refreshed or renewed every now and ever. So at least once a year, that is also installed with the Windows Update, and it's a rolling upgrade, so you don't have to install the systems from scratch. Then we have the native integration with Azure. Here you see our on-premise Freenode Azure Stack HCI cluster registered in a subscription in a resource group, and this gives us the advantage that we can integrate more and more services here. So Microsoft is working, of course. Monitoring is already done. The expansion, we will get self-service, so users can start their VMs and care about their VMs if you want them to do that. Very promising. Then we get self-service VMs from Azure. You choose in the Azure portal, you choose deploy this VM onto Azure Stack HCI, and then the VM will be deployed from Azure to your Azure Stack HCI installation. And it can be just a VM, or it can be a VM with software in it. So that's very exciting for me. And then another thing that is coming to Azure Stack HCI, it's already in preview, is the Azure Kubernetes services from Azure. The same services you get on Azure Stack HCI. And that's extremely interesting because a lot of Azure services are based on containers. And if you have Kubernetes on your Azure Stack HCI, you can get additional Azure services running in your environment. For example, first implementation are the Arc-enabled data services like SQL or Postgres. So a lot of great things. So let's come to the conclusion. What are the main advantages of Storage Spaces Direct? It's a really reliable and proven solution. It's there for 4 years. A lot of installation are out there. It's rock solid. You you can do it. It's great. And if you want to virtualize Windows Server VMs, it's the best all-in price of every HCI solutions, including Azure Stack HCI. So this is the best you get for your money. On the other hand, Azure Stack HCI has a very tight integration with Azure, and it will be getting tighter and tighter. So you have a true hybrid system, and you get new features at least every year. And the support is very affordable and a good pricing. So let's thank Crystal and Dave for doing the S2D day and having me again as a speaker. Thank you.